Sometimes I'm afraid to speak when the choir sings like that. The Unitarian Universalist Association has a commission on appraisal, which is convened at least every 4 years to examine some issue regarding our denomination. They were convened this past year to study what is the unity within UU diversity. In 1933, in the depths of the Depression, the Unitarian part of our movement was in such doldrums that its continued existence as an association was in question. In an attempt to find out what could be done to revitalize it, a group of concerned ministers and laypersons won the endorsement of the annual meeting to form the commission, the first commission of appraisal. The commission, headed by Frederick May Elliott, examined every aspect of the Unitarian movement, from its churches in Boston headquarters and the values and needs of its individual members. As a result of its studies, Unitarians faced a new age, a dynamic new administration was created, and there was a feeling of rebirth among many in our movement. When the Universalist Church of America and the American Unitarian Association merged in 1961 to form the Unitarian Universalist Association, the Commission on Appraisal was written into the bylaws. It's given ongoing responsibility for evaluating the life of our movement and for making a report to the General Assembly. Recent reports have included the meaning of membership in 2002. In 1997, the nature of congregational polity, how our congregations are independent yet connected to the whole. And in 1983, racial justice. These studies are designed to give us an idea of who we are. The results of the first commission produced an interesting result in 1936. 2 lists, one upon which UUs agree upon and what they disagree upon. They asked the question, could Unitarianism say what it stood for without violating its long tradition of resistance to a creed? Yes, the commission thought, if both agreements and tensions were set forth. If these listings were explicitly labeled tentative, in fact, the commission offered such a list. Unitarians agree. 1, in affirming the primacy of the free exercise of intelligence in religion, believing in the long run that the safest guide to truth is human intelligence. 2, in affirming the paramount importance for the individual of his own moral convictions and purposes. 3, in affirming the social implications of religion are indispensable to its vitality and validity, as expressed in terms of concern for social conditions and the struggle to create a just social order. 4, in affirming the importance of the church as an organized expression of religion. 5, in affirming the necessity for worship as a deliberate effort to strengthen the individual's grasp of the highest spiritual values of which they are aware. And 6, in affirming the rational nature of the universe. Now, as I read those, there might be those who agree and disagree with those. And then there's the list of things in which Unitarians disagree. 1, as to the expediency of using the traditional vocabulary of religion within a fellowship which includes many who have rejected ideas commonly associated with such words as God, prayer, communion, salvation, and immortality. As to the wisdom of maintaining the definite Christian tradition and the traditional forms of Christian worship. And then counter as to the religious value of a purely naturalistic philosophy. 4, as to the adequacy and competency of man to solve his own problems, both individual and social. And 5, as to the advisability of direct action by churches in the field of social and political problems. As I read these lists about what Unitarians and Universalists agree and disagree on, it seems, after all these years, there has been little change. As a denomination that embraces diversity, we often find it difficult to find what holds us together. What is our unity? I recently filled out a survey from the Commission on Appraisal asking what our worship practices are. And this is one of their first salvos into information gathering. And so on one level, they will have the numbers about how many congregations light candles of joy and concern, how many congregations use the Bible, and what other sources are used and how frequently they're used, and how many congregations celebrate water communion or flower communion. But hopefully through public meetings and further surveys, they'll find more than just the bean counting of different things we do, but something to the nature of what holds us together. Our recent congregational survey here asked people the reasons they joined the fellowship. Now, people were allowed to check more than one square, so these will not add up to 100%. 76% said to be with like-minded people. 65% said intellectual stimulation. 48% said a desire for a spiritual home. And 44% said the warmth of members. We were fairly unified in seeking like-minded people. But what does this mean? See, could I imagine if you surveyed the Ku Klux Klan or the Michael Jackson fan club, you would probably get a similar number. Because it's a sociological fact that people tend to join groups in which they agree with people, that they find like-minded people. But most groups have an identifying focus. They can easily identify the thing that they are like-minded about. UUs do not always agree. In fact, they pride themselves in their disagreement. Think about these questions. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand, but think about where you might raise your hand. Are we a church? A fellowship? A congregation? Which of those would you answer yes to or no to? Are we a spirituality? A faith? A religion? Or a philosophy? Which of those are you most comfortable with? Now, the latest UUA slogan is the uncommon denomination. You can go to the website and find information about that. It's a marketing strategy. It's a clever slogan. I have the bumper sticker on my van, but technically it's wrong. We like to disagree because we are not a denomination, because Baptists, Catholics, and Presbyterians are denominations or types of Christians. 5s, 10s, and 20s are denominations or types of money. What are UUs a denomination or type of? Are we a faith of our own, like Hinduism, Judaism, or Islam? Or are we just a distant derivative of Christianity, as Baha'is are to Islam or as Reconstructionists are to Judaism? Maybe we are the denomination of the Abrahamic fringe, and we could join the Baha'is and the Reconstructionist Jews. So, despite all this difference among us, it's amazing that we perceive other UUs as like-minded. Though we do not agree on the ultimate answers of religion, we do agree that the questions are important, which leads us to our second most common response. 65% said they joined for intellectual stimulation. UUs do not enjoy being spoon-fed answers. They like to look for themselves. They are okay if other people, the people sitting next to them, even find different answers. Our opening hymn, "Down the Ages We Have Trod," contains these words: "Though the truth we can't perceive, this at least we must believe. What we take most earnestly is our living deity. Our true God we shall there find in what claims our hearts and minds." We believe that each person is responsible to find their own truth. We also believe that it's best done in a community of spiritual seekers. We create a spiritual home by giving space for people to breathe. Instead of squeezing people into uniform belief, we let people ask their own questions. The spirit of inquiry goes where it will. What allows that is the warmth of community. A warm community welcomes ideas. We are curious about each other. We do not browbeat people into submission. We invite them to express themselves. UUA President William Sinkford writes, "As I look around our hurting world, I cannot help but believe that the world would be a better place if our Unitarian Universalist message of love and acceptance were more widespread." Is love and acceptance our unifying message? Perhaps it is. Another bumper sticker in the Uncommon Denomination campaign is different people. I think we'd probably agree with that. Different beliefs, one faith. This might be closer to the truth. Our faith is our belief in each other. This is what creates community. At a recent UU class, a new member was told by his Gulf buddy to ask me, "What do UUs worship?" He was told that you might as well stay home on Sunday morning if you're planning to go to a UU church. And I told him, well, if worship is defined as submission to a God or a creed, then we worship nothing. But if we go back to the original meaning of worship, which means to shape worth, we do it all the time. We worship the awe-inspiring universe. We worship the right to question. We worship the right to choose our own answer. We worship the right to change our mind when new evidence appears. We worship love in all its manifestations. That is why we advocate for gay marriage, why we advocate for multiculturalism. That is why we want a society that respects all people of all religions. That is why we prefer diplomacy to war. Because we worship love, we work for justice. And we believe that justice must be for all, or otherwise it is not justice at all. That the reading from Emerson, and it's my own bias that I think that most of us are transcendentalists, is that reading within us is the soul of the whole, the wise silence, the universal beauty to which every part and particle is equally related, the eternal one. There is a confidence among us that looking deeply into ourselves, we can find the answer to the whole. For the humanist, it's knowing that if we discover what is the core of our humanity, we are better able to relate to other humans. For the Christian transcendentalists, they know that the divine that resides within them is the same divinity that resided in Jesus Christ. For the pagan, they know that their reaction to the beauty of nature gets them in touch with what is holy about the trees and the sky. And our anthem today. We are one of the few churches that can take a pop song and make it our anthem. The bridge over troubled water. That sense of transcendence, somehow reaching over, and that very transcendence is paradoxical. Just as we find the universe by looking inside, we become a bridge over troubled water by laying ourselves down, by committing ourselves. We are a place of refuge for those who have been battered by religion. We are a bridge that is able to hold things in tension. A bridge between the shores of atheism and theism, between individuality and community, a bridge between reason and imagination, the bridge between political action and personal growth. Our unity is in our ability to live in that tension. And the more bridges we can create between the polarizing forces of this world, the better it will be for our movement and for our world. This time, I want to ask you what you believe is the unity in our tradition. And I'm going to ask people to come and stand up before the microphones so that we can be recorded, as we did the other day with our thing on Americans United. And please note, if you are the fourth person in line or you're going to be the fifth person in line, realize that we probably don't have time for your question, and you should probably save it for afterwards, as we will continue this conversation for years to come. Is there anybody who wishes to speak? Please come forward. Yes, to ask questions. Yeah, or comment, ask questions, say what you think is the unifying thing. But if you could speak into the microphone, other people will hear you better.
I can't believe this. Nobody else is up here. You've left me an open mic. This is good. I'll be very brief. I agree with everything you say, Charlie. I really do. It's a wonderful sermon. You captured my feelings precisely. And I think that my challenge to Christian friends and other religious friends who challenge our faith or ask questions, that they act like we do not have a faith. But we have faith. We live it every day. It isn't necessarily a faith focused on one word or one God or one direction. It's a faith towards each other. And even in our diversity, and Lord knows I don't agree with all of you on so many things, but there's a faith that each of us will try to do the right thing and that we have a net gain for the betterment of civilization. And I have faith in that with each one of you. And that is the requirement of our faith and our fellowship and our church and our congregation and what all we are. So that's how I feel, and I wanted to make that comment.
Well, I seem to want to talk today. Much earlier in my life, when I was living in Boston area, I got to know a family, and one was an Episcopal bishop of the cathedral in Washington and also of the Episcopal Church. And then we got to know his son, who also decided to become a minister, and he went to a seminary. It may have been in the one in Harvard, which he would be like his father. His father was a very important man at that time in Christianity. Well, he did, and he went to join a church and to be a minister there. But he didn't like it very much. So what he did was, over a period of time, he told his father, who was this incredible bishop of the world practically, that he didn't like it very much, and he wasn't going to do this. So what did he do? Sometime later, he simply left the church he was in and went to another part of New England, where he became a Unitarian. And this was the first time I had ever heard of any son of any bishop of the church becoming a Unitarian. So this was an eye-opener to me. And it's nothing I've forgotten, because my wife, Nancy, was a proper Baptist, because her father was chairman of religion at the university here. As soon as she got out of town, she quit. And she went north with her new husband to Boston, and they went over to that famous historic Unitarian Universalist church, King's Chapel, in Boston. And not long after that, she and her husband became Unitarians. When they moved to all places, I said I was having trouble with names, but to Detroit. So from then on, she was a devoted Unitarian. And then when she and I got together, she interested me in Unitarianism, which I didn't know much about, having been a Presbyterian and Episcopalian as a growing up kid. So I came here to this community with her and started going to this Unitarian Universalist fellowship. And of course, some of my friends here are the ones that I got to know very well, and began to find out what the heck was going on with this church. This fellowship. And then I just decided I would become a member, and I was made a member by Carol over here, one of our choir singers. And I've been a good member ever since, and I've liked it.
Thank you.
All I have to do now is pay my respect to Greg Jemback and
Yes.
give him some money.
Thank you. And as a good Unitarian, I'm going to get a turn. I have something very brief, actually. I just want to say that I think one thing we have in common is that we tend to think before we act, rather than act before we think. I was thinking about that last night during Waiting for Godot, that we thought an awful lot before we acted. And therefore, it became a much richer experience. That's it. Thank you.
The thing I wanted to add is that not only, I think, are we seekers in our own way for our own truth, but I think that because we're committed to looking for what is wonderful and beautiful in each of us, we also have to work for the justice in the world. And if we don't act on our faith, that everything is lost. And I think that's what might have been left out a little bit in our discussion.
But it is very present in our closing hymn. Please rise as you are able and join in singing hymn number 113, Where is Our Holy Church?